that you were made to do more than one thing. And it really is your job to discover that thing.
Welcome to The Portfolio Life with Jeff Goins. This is the podcast that helps you to pursue work that matters, make a difference with your art, and discover your true voice. I'm your host, Jared Easley. This is our kickoff episode. Jeff will share why he's launching a podcast and what you, the listener, can expect from the show. But first, this episode is brought to you by Jeff's latest book, The In-Between. The In-Between is a call to accept the importance that waiting plays in our lives. You are invited to pick up your copy of The In-Between by going to goinswriter.com/inbetween. And now, Jeff Goins.
Hi, Jeff. Welcome to your podcast.
Hey, Jared. Good to be here.
So, Jeff, the question I'm sure that some people will be wondering is, why podcasting?
Well, that's a great question. I think as we're going to talk more about this show, I think we'll explore this theme a little bit. But I think now, more than ever before, people are realizing that they're not just one thing. And for me, that means I'm not just a writer. I mean, writing is certainly a core part of my profession, my vocation, and something that I feel strongly that I need to do in order to, make my contribution to the world. But really, for me, in many ways, writing is a medium to get a message out there that matters. And as much as I believe in writing for the pure love of the craft, I'm not just a writer, I'm a speaker, I'm an entrepreneur. That's something that I'm, slowly beginning to accept. And podcasting is a great way to get your message out there. And I've been really slow to the game on this, and I'm embarrassed about this, but I feel like I do have something to say. I have a message that I think resonates with people, and I want to reach more people. And I think for the longest time, I was so pigeonholed in, well, I'm just a writer, and writers just write, and I don't want to, or I don't need to spend the time learning this, the technicalities of the technology, or exactly, what it takes to be a podcaster, because I'm just a writer. And that's silly, because, as we're going to talk about, with the theme of this show, that's not true. What I am is I'm a communicator, and writing is one of the ways that I get my message out there, and it's an important way, but this is another.
Jeff, you mentioned the theme of the show. Would you be willing to share with the listeners where you came up with the name for the podcast?
Sure. Well, short answer is I didn't come up with it. I borrowed it, like all great ideas and all good artists. I steal from other artists. So the name of the show is The Portfolio Life. And that is a concept that I came across a few years ago. My friend Keith Jennings, who's a brilliant guy that many people sadly probably haven't heard of, but a really brilliant creative. He really embodies this idea of the portfolio life. He's a writer, he's an entrepreneur, he works in the medical field, he's a blogger, a poet, a whole bunch of different things. And this idea comes from a book called The Age of Unreason. And then he just kind of coined the phrase, a portfolio life, to basically suggest in this era of the knowledge worker, which was a phrase, I think, coined by Peter Drucker, which is this idea that in the post-industrial era, when people aren't just contributing to the machine of industrialization, of the assembly line, but where we now live in the information age, where what you know is in some ways more important than what you can do. In that era, when all of our basic necessities and needs are met, maybe one of the smartest, most fulfilling things that you can do vocationally is not just do one thing. Our grandparents or great-great-grandparents went to school, graduated high school, went to the factory, and worked until they retired, got their pension, and then, played dominoes or whatever until they died. And we know that just doesn't happen as much anymore, that people have lots of different careers, and people are making career changes every few years, if not more rapidly than that. And we're seeing, huge corporations that, are monoliths in our society all of a sudden dying away. So, what is the individual? What is the artist or entrepreneur or, person who feels like they've got a skill to contribute? What do? Well, maybe they don't just do that one thing. They don't just go work for that one job, but instead they look at their whole body of work, a portfolio of work, and they say, I'm a writer, but I also love golf and I really like philanthropy. And so I'm going to create a lifestyle for myself that allows me to do all of these things that I find fulfilling, that I do really well, and that I can get, maybe paid for. And so that's the idea of the show is, if you're an artist, that's great. We want to talk to you about art, but we also want to talk to you about, how you're going to make a living off of your art, or, what other passions you might have. Or if you're an entrepreneur, that's great, but we want to talk to you about, some of the other interests that you have, because we realize that not everybody is just one thing. We are composites of a lot of different interests, of our own context and environments, and all of those influences contribute to make us a well-rounded person. So why not be okay with that and explore that and talk about all of the different things that interest and inspire us and that make us into artists and entrepreneurs and people who want to make a difference in the world.
Jeff, what can the listeners expect from the Portfolio Life?
Well, I think you can expect to be surprised. That's my hope. I don't want to just do something that's safe. As a writer, it would have been very safe for me to just do a podcast about writing, but it wouldn't have been very challenging, and frankly, it wouldn't be, that inspiring for me. We will talk about writing because I'm a writer, but we might also talk about business and nonprofit work. But I think the thread that's going to be woven through all of these interviews and shows and Q&As is that you were made to do more than one thing. And it really is your job to discover that thing, which I would probably call, art or vocation or calling, that creative work that you were made to do. And the job of this show is to help you name it, find it, and do it the best that you can.
Jeff, you mentioned interviews and Q&A. Is this going to be primarily an interview-based show?
No, I don't think so. I think that's going to be part of what we do. It will probably be half of what we do. There are a lot of voices that inspire me, and I want to share some of those voices with you, some of which you'll recognize and some of which you may not. And I want to introduce you to some of the people that inspire me and just hear what they have to say. I recognize that, I don't have all, if any, of the wisdom on this subject that we want to explore, but I'm really interested in just as in the portfolio of my work, I want to treat this show as a portfolio of other people's work, where we're curating some of the best content and inspiration from the audience and from other voices that inspire me, and maybe from some of my own ideas as well.
Jeff, do you have any final thoughts for the listeners in this introduction episode?
I think what would be cool is to start with a question. So this is a conversation not just between you and me, Jared, or the person that I might end up interviewing, but between us and the audience. And so what I want to begin with is this challenge, which is if you've never thought of your work as a portfolio, if you've never thought of your life as a portfolio, first, I want to give you permission to do that, because I think it's clear that we don't, just live these, monolithic lifestyles. We're parents and spouses and boyfriends and girlfriends and significant others, and we're also artists and connoisseurs of great coffee, and there are lots of different interests that make us who we are. And so first I want to give you permission to own that and step into that. If you've never really embraced the fact that you are living a portfolio life, that is something that more and more people are talking about and doing. And second, we want to hear from you. We want for you to name your portfolio. What is that right now? And if you don't know what it is, that's okay. We're going to explore that. But if you go, this is my portfolio. I am an artist entrepreneur who, cares about helping impoverished kids in India or something. That's kind of what we're going for, is helping you tap into this body of work that makes you who you are and gives significance to the work that you do, whether it's vocationally, you're getting paid for it on a regular basis, or maybe it's avocationally, where you're doing it on the side as a hobby. So what is your portfolio? And we want to hear from you about that. Feel free to give us feedback. We can, give you some ways to do that. But I want to begin with that question, and then we're going to explore that together for, the duration of this show.
Jeff, lastly, in addition to listening to the podcast, where are some other places that the listeners can go to just be involved and included in what all's going to be coming up throughout the Portfolio Life?
So, my main hub is my blog. I mentioned that I'm a writer. And that's where I try to share, most of my good ideas and, sources of inspiration. And that's at goinswriter.com. Goins is spelled like coins, but with a G, Goins writer.com.
Won't you roll the dice so I can know which way I should go?
Thank you for listening to the kickoff episode of the Portfolio Life with Jeff Goins. Please consider joining the community on Facebook by going to facebook.com/GoinsWriter. And of course, you're invited to visit Jeff's website, goinswriter.com, where you can receive some of his best work for free, including the Writer's Manifesto and the original Wrecked Manifest. Thanks again for listening to the show.
Not everybody is just one thing. We are composites of a lot of different interests, of our own contexts and environments, and all of those influences contribute to make us a well-rounded person. So why not be okay with that and explore that and talk about all of the different things that interest and inspire us and that make us into artists and entrepreneurs and people who want to make a difference in